So this is the tactic that we have in this image. And the key to this tactic and what made it so famous was that the Mongols would take advantage of the overconfidence of the enemies. Sounds familiar? Maybe the overconfidence part? This is exactly what happens to many traders. The market here represents the enemy, not as a person or as a team of people, but there are certain scenarios or market traps that lead you into believing something and raising your expectations. And then, when you least expect, the market reverses or does something you were not expecting at all. And it's under the surprise factor that traders get trapped. The reality is, the market is not your enemy, it's actually yourself. It's you versus you. The market might throw you all types of market traps or things you're not expecting, but it's in your responsibility as a trader to maintain a rather neutral view during the session. And this is what mainly sets successful traders apart from the rest. They are capable of holding a neutral view or an unbiased view throughout the session, regardless of the market events, trade results, market moves. Their perception doesn't get distorted as much as the perception of less experienced traders. Because if you think about the rules traders set from themselves, we see a lot of traders set the rule of taking only one trade per day or being done after 2 losses in a row. These rules, they are not for the mathematical part. In fact, if you keep taking trades according to your strategy, you will have more results. If you have an edge, of course. These rules are made to manage the human part and to keep your perception unbiased. When the market opens, it's more easy to maintain this unbiased perspective, but as you take trades or as the market shows its end and price action unfolds, it gets more and more challenging to maintain this neutral view. And in this sense, you must work on 2 essential fronts. The first one, practicing an unbiased view, regardless of what happens in the market, the results, the market moves, etc. And this basically means exposing yourself to enough stress that allows you to practice your discomfort tolerance, but not enough to spoil your performance. And I've wrote a past post on increasing your tolerance to discomfort, which is a very rare skill that gives you an advantage in trading. If you want to read the full article, I'll leave the link below in the description. And the second one is assessing the quality of your perception throughout the session. This is about awareness, to understand if you should keep trading or if you should step back and reframe. Good trading is a dance between these two. And it's only when you have these two in place that you can see the mass thinking or the crowd behavior footprints on the chart, so you can take that big perspective and utilize that information in your advantage. Let's see how. This takes many forms. For example, this might mean waiting for a level to retest when everyone entered on the breakout, taking your profits when everyone is greedy, or letting them run when everyone is fearful, seeing where the biggest liquidity pools with stop losses and pending orders are likely located, and using the information to make your move or practice patience. However you utilize this mass thinking knowledge, it's important to highlight that you'll only get to this stage when you truly understand yourself. And this is because you've been there. You've been through these market traps. You've been emotional. You probably lost tons of money with your emotional reactions. But now, because you've been through it, and knowing that the survival instinct is pretty much the same from human to human, you know what it looks like. And you can identify how most traders are reacting to a certain level, psychological level or a pattern. Better, not more, information gives you an edge. When you master your own psychology, you gain also the knowledge and the awareness of what's happening on the charts. Where is the mass thinking located? Where are most traders looking to do? What's their next steps and what they're looking at? And this gives you an immense advantage. So how are you using this knowledge to your advantage in trading? Share it in the comments below. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Peaceful trading, Sarah. If you loved this video, you will absolutely love my weekly newsletter, The High Performing Not all trading mistakes have the same weight. And something I see traders do a lot is categorizing all of their mistakes and putting them into one same box of self blame. Some mistakes are unavoidable, other mistakes are more repetitive and habitual, and they deserve different treatment. So, starting to categorize your mistakes is actually the first step to accepting imperfection and breathing the self acceptance, which is the first step to seeing real progress. In this video, we will talk about the 5 types of trading mistakes so you can start categorizing them and give them the best treatment each type deserves. So, let's get into it. Trading mistakes can be categorized into 5 types. We have sloppy mistakes, emotional mistakes, first time mistakes, complacency mistakes, and knowledge gap mistakes. So, the first category, sloppy mistakes. These are mistakes caused by lack of basic needs and capacity, which means they have to do with the basis of the pyramid, what I like to call the basic needs of the human being. We're talking about sleep, nutrition, physical exercise, when focus as well and capacity. When we don't have these in place, it becomes way more easy to make sloppy mistakes. And these happen mostly without awareness. You only recognize you've made the mistake at the end of the session or after the fact. So, some action steps for you to avoid this type of mistakes, if it already happened to you, is to keep your trading desk clean and tidy and everything organized. Have a good sleep schedule. Have a good life routine because the brain that you have is the brain that you bring to the desk, to the charts, so it has a huge influence on your performance. Also, if you have a busy schedule for a day of the week and you predict that you will not be able to keep your highest focus and energy for that training session, your best bet is to just skip that training session. Doesn't make sense to offering resistance to other priorities that you have in life. The same goes for personal issues, or if you're feeling sick, it's not worth it to go to the trading desk and force yourself to have your best performance because your capacity is not there. So you will not be able to utilize your best knowledge. Second category, we have the emotional mistakes, which is perhaps the biggest slice of, of the mistakes here. And these are mistakes made out of fear, greed, overconfidence, excitation, all these type of heightened emotions. The key here is into recognizing that it's not the emotions that cause the mistake. It's when those emotions pass a certain threshold of intensity. This is when they become problematic. And this is where you want to interrupt your autopilot and insert something in between that takes you out of the charts and recomposes your calm and slows down your heart rate. Breathing techniques are actually a great way of doing so. But the key step here is in interrupting yourself when you get in the survival instinct. Does it make sense to keep trading? You always have the option to come back later or to come back the day after. Action steps. The way to handle these type of mistakes involves a deeper approach. And these are the type of mistakes that I'm used to handle on the one-on-one coaching with the traders. They are repetitive. They most of the times come from deeply ingrained beliefs formed in early ages. So it involves an identity shift. So if you are interested in taking a look to my coaching program, I'll leave the link in the description. But a very good action step that you can already take is familiarizing yourself with your problem pattern. When is it happening? What's triggering your intense emotions? What are you doing differently? How does your perspective and your cognitive function changes when you get triggered? And understanding how this evolves is crucial to put a stop on it. I wrote a past newsletter. There's also a past video on the emotional temperature scale, which is a tool that helps you raise your conscious awareness, and it's a very good thing to implement here. I will also leave the link below in the description for you to visit it. The third type of mistakes, first time mistakes, or how I like to call them, unavoidable mistakes. And these are the type of mistakes that they come from different market conditions that you never experienced before, new information that you've been exposed to. So in essence, because you are absorbing that type of information for the first time, you will make some mistakes coming from that gap of experience, let's call it this way. And these are the type of mistakes that you should absolutely not beat yourself up for it. I mean, you should not do it for any type of mistake, but if it's one that's crucial not to do it, it's these type of mistakes. You always get the chance to develop one action plan to address it for the next time the situation occurs. But it's important to understand that these mistakes are important for you to learn. It's part of the learning process. So the action plan to address this mistake is recognize the mistake is a first-time mistake, understand in which environment it happened, and build more knowledge. Improve your knowledge about the situation at hand. If you need to backtest the same market environment to gather more information and feel more confident about executing in that condition, do so. And the second measure here is to address it right away and create an improvement plan so it doesn't happen next time. First time mistakes are normal, but what's good to do is to recognize them and to right away immediately establish something you can change about it to improve. Then we have the fourth category of trading mistakes, and these are the complacency mistakes. These are done by neglecting preparation, and they mostly happen when traders are on a winning streak, they are satisfied with their performance, or they've reached a very good week or month profit-wise, and so they become quite lazy and complacent with the routines that have been working for them. So, for example, skipping the market review, the pre-trading session routine, and subconsciously they start to tend to their comfort zones. They start to get complacent. Two action steps that I have for you is to take your daily routines seriously. Really understand what are the 20% of actions that are driving your 80% of the results and your best trading performance, and lock them in and make them non-negotiables. And you can also set accountability measures, so tracking your progress, check marking the activities that you've done for the day, and really having these tracking measures help you keep accountable. This has all to do with the journaling process. Now, what I also see a lot, especially with some of the traders that I work with, is some fear of success. So if you notice that every time you have a winning streak or a good month or a good period, you find yourself self-sabotaging and returning back to default mode, there's probably a problem of fear of success, which is not directly related with fear of success, right? None of us fear success in its literal sense. It's more what success brings, the responsibilities. And so I wrote a post about this, and I suggest you going in there to understand if this is really the case. If you're experiencing trading plateaus or resistances in profit ranges, you go to a certain profit and you cannot get out of it, or you self-sabotage your progress after some weeks or months of good performance, I would suggest you to go there and read the post. You'll find it insightful. Link in the description below. The fifth category of mistakes, these are knowledge gap mistakes, and they happen due to a misunderstanding of information or when there's incomplete information. So, for example, when you misinterpret a news headline or a market news data release, numbers release, and you trade it in a certain way, but it was due to your distortion of perception. So you misunderstood it. So action steps for you here primarily raise your awareness of this gap. If you don't know that your perception is distorted at the time, you will just act on it. So awareness here is really key. Then create a resource list for quick reference during your trading sessions. So these important events, all these type of tiny tasks that you need to perform in your session to keep yourself on check, put it on a piece of paper or in your journal and check them as you go. And finally, always make sure to double check your assumptions. You surely don't want to be making any decisions or formulating any narrative under high intense emotion. So the way you interpret this information has to do with the emotional state you are in. If that's the case, you want to reduce the emotional intensity, you want to calm yourself down to make sure you have the best interpretation of the information at hand. So these are the 5 categories of mistakes. And in addition to these, there are 2 ways you can make a mistake. You can perform a mistake, and that's under awareness or without awareness. And for these 2 types of ways of executing mistakes, there are also different ways of implementing measures, of treating them. So if you tend to become aware of your mistakes only after the fact or after analyzing the session, then your next project is to work on raising your self awareness. And you want to do this by externalizing your thoughts. Because when they are bottled up in the mind, sometimes they become difficult to access. So, from the moment you write them down, you journal them, you talk through them aloud or to other traders, you can even voice record yourself just for the sake of externalizing your thoughts. It helps you organize them way better and raise your self awareness. So, here you really want to push your self awareness for early stages. Now, if your struggle is to interrupt yourself, so you are consciously aware of the mistake happening, but even in that environment you decide to move forward with the mistake, then this requires a different approach. It requires you to start mastering impulse control by reinforcing your no-go brain function. I talk about this in a past read that I will leave the link below in the description for you to read, of how you can strengthen your impulse control, how you can practice these so you can start. When I started trading, I thought that chasing these big wins was the holy grail. I thought these big wins were the way to increase my equity curve and become a successful trader. But what I noticed was that every time I had a big win, my losses had a way to wipe it all out. So I could be making progress for weeks, perhaps with the bad behaviors, and there was that day where I would have a big loser, and all of the profits made on the previous days would just go all thrown out of the window. And looking back, I realized I had a skill that was underdeveloped, and that was capital preservation. And that took me to develop a new relationship with losses. I needed to learn how to become a great loser. So that became a project of mine. And with the insights I gained, with my experience, with the experience of the traders I work with and help also becoming great losers, I decided to make this video to explain you a little bit about the neuroscience and psychology behind losing and how you can become a better loser in your trading. There are studies made with gamblers and on the casino that show that dopamine is released not only when we reach a reward, when these casino gamblers would win, but actually way before the reward is reached, with the anticipation of it. In this case, dopamine doesn't indicate pleasure of having won. It actually indicates how close the gambler got from the reward and encourages another attempt, and another one until they wipe all their gains. In this same spirit, there are certain market scenarios that are more likely to set you off, and those are the scenarios where your expectations are at its highest. So we're talking about making a trade out of fear of missing out, a sudden reversal that you were not expecting, a false breakout, a near miss. And here, the dopamine released in the anticipation of this reward or this win will be your worst enemy. Why? Well, your brain expects a certain reward, floods your bloodstream with dopamine, and then that reward doesn't come true. So this dopamine that was released in your bloodstream doesn't just disappear. It creates a strong drive to continue trading to recover that lost high. And here we're talking about revenge trading. So it's not only the psychology that it's against you. Chemically speaking, these are the moments that are more capable of setting you off, where the mental odds are against you. Now, the real question is, psychologically, you can control yourself. Now, can you control your neurotransmitters in your brain? Can you control the chemistry of your brain to undo this dopamine reward system? Well, the answer is yes and no. You cannot control releasing serotonin after a win, so the feeling of satisfaction, or dopamine in the expectation of a reward, or even adrenaline when the market conditions are more volatile. What you can do, though, is regulate your expectations that are the base for the release of these neurotransmitters, of these hormones. A study found that our perception of reward probability actually influences how dopamine gets released in our brain. So when we believe a reward is more likely to happen, when there's expectation behind it, dopamine will be released in much more quantity than when we keep things more neutral and we expect a certain outcome, but being aware of the uncertainty and recognizing that uncertainty in the equation. So, in essence, these expectations are the basis for the dopamine release in the body. The solution, however, is not to eliminate them. This would be anti-natural, anti-human. We have expectations, and this has been helping us survive and predict what's going to happen next, right? We can, though, spread them across multiple scenarios. And I bet that this is something you do before your session starts. You prepare for the if scenarios, for the different market conditions. You set reactions for those. And this helps you start your session on a better note. Now, when the market starts moving, it becomes more difficult to do this. There's always a certain scenario that starts to weigh more on our brain. And we can't help but to predict. And this is normal. So our brain was made to function on certainty. And whenever the uncertainty starts to increase, our brain has its way to protect us by overcompensating with the expectations, with the certainty, by overthinking, trying to find a solution to fix the uncertainty. Except that in the market, we don't control the external outcomes, at least in the short term, in the market environment. So this is when your brain will start to work against you, chemically releasing these hormones, psychologically and cognitively. So perception distortion. So what can you do to counter this? Well, you can force yourself to remind that anything can happen at any point in time of the trading session. The unrealized profits are not yours, even when a market scenario seems very imminent. Just reminding yourself that the opposite can occur, your scenario might not materialize, helps you balance out your hormones in your body and your psychology. So, and if you cannot handle this pressure of expectations, just take something out of the trade in case you are in a trade and ride the rest of the position with this anything can happen mindset. Uncertainty doesn't come natural to us. So if you want to train your brain to think in probabilities, you need to constantly remind it that you are in an uncertain environment, anything can happen, but whatever it happens, you are armed with the tools to handle such scenario. This is the way to tilt your mental odds in your favor. So make efforts to start your trading sessions balanced in terms of expectations by predicting all of the if scenarios and preparing for those, but also make an effort to maintain this anything can happen mindset throughout the trading session. After all, you have more control over your brain's chemistry than you thought. Peaceful trading, Sarah. If you are interested in becoming the best trader, all traders that I work with no exception, experience this same struggle, which is they are aware of what they need to fix. They know how their emotions evolve and when they are about to make a mistake, and they have tried all types of methods and they are in the same trap. So they fall every time into the same cycle of repeating the same mistake again and again. The truth is, awareness is not enough. The moment emotions intensify and you get outside of control, self awareness takes the back seat. So it kind of becomes useless here. There are some nuances and details about self awareness. So, normally traders think they have the highest level of self awareness and the problem is in the interruption, but there are some more nuances. So, in this video, we will explore a tool that helps you improve your conscious self awareness and improve also your quality of your awareness, which is what will dictate your power to interrupt yourself at the right timing. You can only make the most of your self awareness at until a certain threshold. And this is where the emotional temperature scale gets in. You can only make the best use of your self awareness at a certain emotional intensity. And this is where the emotional temperature scale comes in. This is a tool that I use with the traders that I coach, and that today I'll teach you how to use it to take the most advantage of your self awareness. So, the emotional temperature scale looks something like this that we have here on the image. And I want you to think of emotions like temperature. A calm, rational state is cool, but once emotions rise, you start heating up until you reach a certain boiling point where emotions completely override your ability to think logically. And we all have this threshold. For some traders, it's shorter. For others, traders is bigger. And the aim here is to widen it and to become more tolerant to discomfort. I wrote a past post on becoming better at handling and more tolerant to discomfort. So this has to do with psychological flexibility and adaptation. And I'll leave the link to the post in the description below so you can give it a read. So your job as a trader is not to avoid these boiling point. We all have one. The smartest move here is to understand how your emotions evolve so you can do something before your emotions boil and so you can remain in control. So I'll explain you how to use and build this temperature scale for yourself. So the first step is identifying your triggers. What are the triggers that start to heat up your emotions, to bother you, to trigger you? Is it a missed trade? Is it a two consecutive losers? What is it that bothers you? The first step is to identify all of these triggers inside of the charts. You also can do it outside of the charts. A good idea here is to build one emotional temperature scale for your daily life and then to your in charts and see some similarities in patterns. Number two is creating your scale. So, what I would like you to do is to make a description for the 5 different levels that are inside of the temperature scale. So, we have level 1, where you are calm, focused, steady, you're following your plan, for instance. Then we have level 2, where there's a slight unease. Perhaps you start overthinking, you become unsure of your decisions. Then we have level 3, frustration starts to accumulate, so you make small mistakes. What are these mistakes? Describe the different steps in detail. Then we have level 4, which you become more angry, so you feel feelings of getting out of control, desperate to fix the day. And finally, level 5, which is full loss of control. You perhaps engage in impulsive emotional trading, revenge trading, and you ignore your risk. So, what I want you to do as a third step is really describing it in detail, not only with a short sentence, but the better the detail, the more you can connect with these different levels and be aware of them in real time. So, for example, on level 3, we would have frustration. I feel my chest tighten. I start to think I need to fix the situation, and I start justifying risky trades. Now, number 4 is spotting your line. So we identify the triggers, we build the scale, we associated detailed descriptions with each level, and now we want to understand where is your line. I like to call it survival instinct line, which is where those emotions start to overtake your logical side. This is where you should abandon the charts, regulate your body, and come back calmer when you cool off. And the final step is a routine step, is for you to reflect daily and to add more information to this scale as you go. This will help you raise your self-awareness by the roof. So questions like, at what level did I start to lose control? What triggered it? And what actions can I take earlier next time? By answering these questions on a daily basis, you'll be able to develop your best emotional temperature scale and to raise that self-awareness. Self-awareness is not only about knowing how to fix things and recognizing when emotions are getting out of control. It really takes a next level of being in tune and connected and truly understanding what happens on a body and a mind level when your emotions start to rise. I wrote a past post on how to improve your self awareness and three crucial skills for these, so you can develop a non judgmental view, which is super important for you to make the best use of your self awareness. So I'll leave the description to the post below in case you want to visit it. The better the quality of your awareness, the easier it becomes to interrupt yourself in that autopilot mode. And this interruption, believe me, is the difference between the blowout day and a day where you kept your losses small and you then can come back and survive for the next one. Peaceful trading, Sarah. If you're interested in what happens when you can't help but making a trading mistake, well, there's a tug of war between your logical mind, the one that tells you that following your rules and your trading goals is the right way to go, and your monkey mind, or your instinctive mind, that sees a certain event, a certain market event as a threat, and does everything to avoid it or to fight it to protect your survival. There are certain things that your monkey mind can accept and deal with, and there are others, however, that they are unacceptable, unbearable, intolerable. And the things that are unacceptable to your monkey mind, they got defined at a very young age, in your early years. So for some, embarrassment is something that's unacceptable, or the feeling of inadequacy, or even the most common one, the one that I encounter the most, the fear of failure, or the fear of being wrong, or the fear of making mistakes. So from a young age, we define and label certain feelings as unacceptable. What happens here is that we're rejecting ourselves when we feel those emotions. When everything's all right and we feel positive emotions, we are able to be in agreement with who you are. But when that emotion kicks in, or whenever there's a situation that we see as potentially threatening to triggering that unacceptable emotion, we will avoid that. We will fight that. We will avoid confrontation. So the guy who can't tolerate embarrassment is probably gonna stay away from public speaking. The woman who sees failure as something unavoidable, she's probably a great problem solver, but she will avoid all those situations that she cannot control certain variables to avoid that feeling of failure. Now, the important thing here is that, well, you bring these unacceptable feelings with you to the markets. So, for example, when a trader is trying to catch a move, it's not really about catching that move or making those profits. Is what that move says about his capacity. So, if he perceives himself as a failure by having missed that move, then it's that feeling of failure you will try to avoid. And that's exactly what makes that move so intolerable, so unacceptable to miss. In this sense, and as Van Tharp tells us, we are not trading the markets. We are trading our perception of the markets. I work with many traders on reshaping perception at this level, and these are the typical conflicts that we see over and over again. It's like they enter this self sabotaging cycle. So, if you are ready, fully committed, and interested in reshaping some of the beliefs that have been unproductive to you in your trading, then I'll leave the one on one deviate from it and you start to trade your emotions of the markets. And this is exactly that time where you want to become aware of it, take a break, execute that emotional management routine that we talked about in a previous post. I'll leave the link below, by the way, and then reframe things and perhaps come back with your mental edge in full mode. But for now, I have a small challenge for you that you can execute in the next trading sessions. And that is every time you're faced with a stressful emotion, an emotion where you feel that you need to fight or flight, right? The fight or flight response. Some of us, we have a tendency to avoid confrontation or exitate. That would be the fight flight response. Sorry. Others of us, We like to fight the threat, revenge trade, impulsive trade, right? And so identify what is the emotion that you're trying to fight or run away from. So maybe if you make an impulsive trade, maybe you're running away from the feeling of failure. Maybe if the market is inactive, slow markets, not a lot of setups available, and you make a trade that's outside of your strategy, you're running away from the boredom. If you are hesitating to pull the trigger,